Hello and welcome to today's press conference with Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson and NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte. Following the press conference, the webcast will be available on the Swedish government website, government.se.
Please, Mark.
Thank you.
Okay. Secretary Rutte, dear Mark, welcome to Sweden. Welcome to Stockholm. Really happy to see you here. If you don't mind, I will just give a few remarks in Swedish due to the yesterday night's events in the Middle East. Det är ju ett redan mycket allvarligt och spänt läge i Mellanöstern. Det som nu händer i en instabil region riskerar att göra saker betydligt värre. Det är det första, och det länder ju i grund och botten bara fram till att det finns en mycket bred samsyn om att Iran inte kan tillåtas utveckla kärnvapen. Det skulle inte bara vara ett hot mot hela den regionen utan också mycket, mycket bredare hot än så. Har man sagt det så har ju vi och EU varit väldigt tydliga med att det här måste komma tillbaka till förhandlingsbordet. Uppmanar till återhållsamhet, tillbaka till förhandlingsbordet. Eskalera inte en konflikt i Mellanöstern som redan är otroligt spänd. Det finns också mycket breda risker i detta. Vi ser redan idag med anledning av det som händer i Mellanöstern, mer specifikt i Gaza, så ser vi betydande oroligheter på många håll runt också i vår del av världen. Det här kan driva upp det ytterligare. Risken för terrorhot och andra farliga aktiviteter på europeisk mark ökar i detta. Så vår uppmaning är deeskalering, tillbaka till förhandlingsbordet, säkerställa att Iran inte tillåts utveckla kärnvapen. Och i övrigt så följer vi naturligtvis utvecklingen extremt noga, minut för minut. Det finns inga uppgifter än så länge om svenskar som har råkat illa ut i detta, så vitt vi vet just nu. Ambassadpersonalen i Teheran är välbehållen. On that, Mark and I just had a productive meeting ahead of the upcoming NATO summit, as you realize. Exciting times in so many ways, important times as well. And during our discussion, I shared a few Swedish key priorities ahead of this summit. First, a united alliance is a strong alliance. Extremely important to stress that. In these challenging times, we need to stand together, and I'm very impressed by Mark Rutte's enormous efforts to build this unity ahead of the summit. Second, this is the moment where Europe must take great responsibility for our own defense. Sweden is a leading country to that. We want the summit to manifest strongly increased European ambitions and to set a new ambitious goal for defense spendings. A few months ago, as you know, the Swedish government announced our own plans for Sweden to make the biggest military build-up since the early days of the Cold War. That is a significant step for Sweden. And today, I'd like to confirm that Sweden will reach a new NATO spending target of 5% to GDP, where at least 3.5% to GDP will be allocated towards core defense requirements to fulfill NATO's new capability targets. That is a Swedish decision, and of course we will formalize that again after the NATO summit in The Hague. My government has already announced the increase to 3.5% of GDP, and we did that because we realize that regardless of the NATO summit decision, we are in a specific geographical situation where we need to meet the future threats from Russia. And the backdrop is, of course, the war of aggression against Ukraine, but also the fact that we know Russia since very, very many years. Russia is the threat to Ukraine, but not only to Ukraine, but all European countries and to the alliance. And I think there is a growing sense of urgency. I think that will be reflected also in Mark Rutte's comments among allies that more countries need to do the same thing right now. Third, supporting Ukraine's right to self-defense against Russia. That strengthens the security across the Euro-Atlantic area. It also defends the rules-based world order, which benefits people all over the world. I think Sweden's entry into NATO slightly more than 1 year ago meant that we bring geography and we bring capacity to the alliance. And in terms of geography, I normally say just look at the map. Sweden is one of the largest European countries in NATO in terms of pure size, and we have the longest Baltic Sea coastline, and our historic experience in naval operations in the Baltic Sea is unmatched by any other nation, on the sea, under the surface, and in the air. Regarding Russia, we see increased activity, including Russia allocating more resources than usual to the Baltic Sea right now. We also see that our targeting of the shadow fleet is affecting Russia's economy and diminishing its resources. And together with allies, we will continue and, if needed, ramp up our activities in the Baltic Sea. Now we stand ready as a basing and staging area for the Allied reinforcements. This will strengthen NATO's ability to carry out operations in Northern Europe, in the Baltic Sea, and to reinforce the eastern flank, thereby strengthening the alliance as a whole. Which brings me to our capabilities. I won't bore you in details, but we joined NATO last year as a net security provider to the alliance, bringing some important national strengths across air, land, surface, subsurface, cyberspace, and space domain. For us, all these are kept together. Our advanced defense and space industries, combined with some of Europe's strongest cyber and intelligence capabilities, enhance the alliance capabilities. And since joining NATO, finally, and I won't brag now, but I just want to mention them, we have deployed hundreds of soldiers to NATO's multinational brigade in Latvia. We have sent Swedish fighter jets to NATO's air policing mission, helping to secure Allied airspace. We have provided Gripen fighters to operate in Polish airspace to protect the logistics for providing Ukraine with material. And we have contributed naval forces to NATO's minesweeping units and to NATO's enhanced presence at the Baltic Sentry, increasing the situational awareness, improve NATO's ability to respond to destabilizing acts in the Baltic Sea. Obviously, very necessary activities right now. And we are taking on the responsibility as a framework nation for NATO's enhanced forward presence in Finland. That is what we are trying to do right now. Finally, given the serious security situation right now, Sweden is entering a new phase of investment, building our country stronger through historic commitments to defense industry, to infrastructure, research and energy systems. And we do this in a scale we haven't seen for decades. Obviously, we do this in a very serious situation. We do because we need to do it, but we also think this is an investment that will bring security to Sweden, but also bring prosperity to Sweden. Thank you so much for being here, Mark. Please.
Thank you, Ulf, and thank you for welcoming me to Sweden. It's always a pleasure to see you and to be back in beautiful Stockholm. And this is my first visit here as NATO Secretary General. And it is an honor to be here with our newest ally. Sweden has only been a member of our alliance for now 15 months, but you are already making major contributions across the alliance. Your forces strengthen our posture in the High North and in the Baltic region. As you said, you contribute to forward land forces in Latvia, and you will lead NATO's newly established forward land forces in Finland. Indeed, your Gripen fighter jets help patrol the skies over Poland, and your ships contribute to our enhanced military presence in the Baltic Sea through Baltic Sentry. Sweden is also one of NATO's 7 Arctic allies, and your expertise in the region has enhanced our posture in the High North and strengthens our ability to reinforce our Baltic allies. Last week in Brussels, NATO defense ministers agreed on an ambitious new set of capability targets. These targets describe what capabilities allies need to invest in over the coming years. from our air defense and fighter jets to tanks, drones, logistics, and of course personnel. And this is what it takes to keep our 1 billion citizens safe and to keep our deterrence and defense strong against a rapidly reconstituting Russia. So these targets, these capability targets, are the foundation for a new defense investment plan, a key priority which we will take forward during the NATO summit in The Hague. Last year, Sweden invested already 2.66% of your GDP on defense. And indeed, I welcome your government's strong determination to go much and much further. This is a clear demonstration of Sweden's commitment to collective defense. Boosting defense industrial production is another key priority for the summit in The Hague. And Sweden also here is playing a leading role. Because you have a world-class defense sector. With companies like Saab, the leading supplier to the Swedish armed forces, and Volvo Defense. Sweden is helping to drive forward the modernization and resilience of our collective NATO defense industry. Sweden is also a hub of advanced research on defense industrial capabilities. Sweden is a staunch supporter of Ukraine. Since 2022, you have provided over 7 billion euros in military assistance to Ukraine, including 1.25 billion in the first 4 months of this year alone. In terms of GDP, this places Sweden among the top contributors to Ukraine. And I also welcome your investment in Ukrainian defense industry. You are truly leading by example. We are now less than 2 weeks away from the NATO summit in The Hague. And there I expect leaders to make bold decisions to further strengthen our deterrence and defense, including agreeing a new defense investment plan that would bring our defense investment to 5% of GDP over the next several years. This will ensure that allies have the forces, the capabilities, and also the industrial base required to meet the challenges of today and tomorrow. So, dear Ulf, thank you once again for your hospitality, your leadership, and your commitment to our transatlantic alliance.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mark. Thank you so much. And please, the floor is open.
We'll start with a question from TT over here.
Thank you very much. I would like to ask the General Secretary and also the Prime Minister, could you elaborate regarding the situation in the Middle East with Israel and Iran? You say that this could escalate. How and also what should the international community do right now in order to de-escalate the tensions?
Well, it is obviously a rapidly evolving situation. And this was a unilateral action by Israel. So I think it is crucial for many allies, including the United States, to work as we speak to de-escalate. I know they're doing that. And I think that is now the first order of the day.
To state the obvious, this could escalate. That's quite obvious. It could also de-escalate. Depends on what's going to happen the coming hours and days. And that's why I just said that basically we don't need an escalation in a region which is already so heated in so many ways. For the regional reasons, of course, but also for the risk for spreading problems around the world. So we call for de-escalation, but obviously it is the countries in the region that make their own decisions on that.
Former Swedish PM Carl Bildt calls this an ongoing war right now. Do you agree with him?
An ongoing war?
Yeah, with the latest attack.
Well, I mean, we have seen the warnings have been there. The risks for nuclear armament in Iran has been a big problem for many countries since long. There are reasons behind these negotiations that have been on and off for quite some time. So we take those threats seriously, very much so. If they were to develop nuclear arms, that would be a threat not only for that region, but for many more countries. So we take it very seriously. But the answer should be to de-escalate and get back to the negotiation table.
All right, we'll do the next question from SVT.
Thank you, Anders Öbrink, SVT. A question to you both. First, Mr. Secretary General, Sweden has recently seen a wave of suspected cyber attacks. What is your view? Was this expected when Sweden became a NATO country? And what can NATO do to defend and deter member countries against these kind of cyber attacks? And Mr. Prime Minister, could you elaborate in Swedish on the Swedish GBT goal that you told us about?
Please, Mark.
Yes, and on the cyber attacks, of course, these are facts at the moment that they take place, and they are part of the hybrid threats NATO is facing, and cyber attacks, but of course also in some cases even the jamming of commercial airplanes in the Baltic region. So we see many versions of these hybrid threats, and the cyber attacks are of course a big worry. It's impossible for me to assess whether there is a direct link between these attacks and now Sweden being a member of NATO. Of course, Sweden always had an impressive defense industrial base and an impressive defense system itself. I guess also in the past, our adversaries would also have an interest in Sweden even before you joined NATO. But what we have to do collectively, and this is what NATO is getting better and better at, is to make sure, generally when it comes to these hybrid threats, to make sure that we collectively assess what is happening, that we collectively decide on what is the best way to protect ourselves. Of course, we are not going to make our adversaries any wiser by going into all the details, but you can be assured that we navigate this very closely together and that Sweden plays a big role there.
May I just add on to that? I think the new thing is not Russian interest in trying to affect Sweden in a negative way and to do hostile things in the Baltic Sea. The new thing is our ability to defend ourselves collectively. That's the new thing. And I think the Baltic Century has proven that in a very important way. All the Baltic Sea countries are joining efforts together to counter what we obviously have to see as potential threats from Russia. På svenska, vi fattade ju besluten i Sverige för bara någon månad sedan om att gå till 3,5%, och 3,5% sa vi, det är vårt estimat, vår bästa bedömning av var NATOs mål kommer att hamna. Inte för att följa NATO utan för att vara med och påverka NATO. Vi var övertygade om att NATOs gemensamma försvarsförmåga måste öka rejält från dagens 2% som i princip alla länder når upp till nu till någonting betydligt mycket större. Och då vill vi tillhöra de länder i vår del av världen med störst erfarenhet av Ryssland som går i bräschen för att NATO-mötet i Haag ska kunna fatta ett bindande beslut mellan 3 och 4%. Och nu känner jag mig rätt trygg i att just 3,5% är det som NATO-toppmötet kommer att landa i. Vi vet inte exakt än, allt är inte klart än, och Mark Rutte är den som bäst kan beskriva var alla länder befinner sig. 3,5% i strikt militära förmågor och sen så ytterligare 1,5% i, kan man säga, försvarsrelaterade frågor. Civilförsvar, olika ytterligare cybersäkerhetsfrågor, allt det här som är viktigt också och som inte minst Ukraina lär oss att det militära försvaret också behöver. Så jag tycker det här är en otroligt viktigt steg för Sverige men också för hela NATO och för säkerheten i vår del av Europa. Allra sist, tidsfrågan är viktig här. Vi har sagt att vi är beredda och kapabla att göra detta fram till 2030. Nu får vi se exakt vilket måldatum som NATO-toppmötet landar i. Och det bygger helt enkelt på att vi är övertygade om att Ryssland på 3 till 5 år skulle kunna bygga upp sin förmåga igen, som idag är låst i Ukraina, beroende på hur kriget mot Ukraina slutar. Så det är bråttom, och denna känsla av att det nu är bråttom att göra, den tänker vi vidareförmedla också in i NATO-toppmötet.
Okej.
Sorry.
Aftonbladet, den Ekot.
I will ask both of you regarding the situation in the Middle East right now. How close is maybe a nuclear war or maybe a world war?
No, we are not close. And obviously, allies within NATO are really navigating this crisis. Everybody is focused on de-escalating it. The US, of course, is working on that with other allies. NATO not being involved as an alliance because it is really focusing on the Euro-Atlantic. But obviously, NATO allies very much involved to make sure that the conflict is de-escalated as soon as possible.
I have, of course, the same fundamental view. And having said that, it would be a very, very bad development if Iran were to develop full-scale nuclear weapons. That would threaten the region, but it would also be a big threat for many other countries. So, but the best way to solve that is through the negotiation table.
Ekot.
I have a few questions forward to the summit, but first in Sweden, Ulf Kristersson. Vidtar regeringen några särskilda åtgärder mot bakgrund av det som händer i Iran? Jag tänker på ambassadpersonal och så vidare, svenska företag. Vad gör ni?
Ja, vi agerar ju som vi gör när den sortens saker inträffar som ligger bortom vår kontroll. Att vi ser till att svensk personal på plats, att alla försiktighetsåtgärder vidtas där naturligtvis. Jag känner mig väldigt trygg att vi också är på tårna när det gäller risken för andra spridningseffekter, för terroraktiviteter, sympatiåtgärder på olika sätt som skulle kunna drabba. Men det är inom ramen för att vi har en situation där vi vet att sådana spänningar kan inträffa lite var som helst, inklusive i Sverige. Men vi har just nu inga tecken på något allvarligt som är riktat just mot Sverige. Men jag utesluter inte att sånt kan inträffa. Och därför inledde med att säga att vi har en ganska upphettad situation redan även i Sverige med anledning av det som händer i Mellanöstern. Vi vill inte ha Mellanösterns konflikter på svenska gator och torg. Och det som nu händer ökar den risken. Och det kommer vi göra allt vi kan för att undvika.
Mr. Secretary General, according to the timetable, Sweden talked here about 2030. Other countries I hear talk about 2035. What do you think about that?
Well, of course, I put forward proposals, but what I have made public is the percentage, which is the 5%, 3.5% core defense spending, and then 1.5% focused on defense-related and security-related spending, including developing the defense industrial base and getting the whole of society basically prepared for disasters, including a full onslaught on NATO territory. But I'm not going to disclose my thoughts on the end date because this is of course, these are consultations and taking place now between allies.
So what about this 5% goal? If we focus on the 1.5%, which is a new one, could that be investment also that could support the military, like railways, roads? Yes. Yeah. Can it also be the overall resilience of society?
Yes. Yeah, so the idea here is the following. We have always focused as NATO and in all our discussions on the core defense spending. That's the famous 2% coming out of Wales, the Welsh pledge. And two things have happened. First of all, the Welsh pledge was basically this. It was just a figure plucked from the air. The new number, the 3.5 core defense spending, is really rooted now in this whole NATO defense planning process from which we have decided the targets we need to achieve and the gaps therefore we have indicated there are to make sure that we can defend the 1 billion people living in NATO territory. So that's new, that we not only have a number, but that the number is rooted in facts, figures and deep studies on what NATO needs to defend the whole of NATO territory. The second new thing is that next to that old 2%, the new 3.5%, we also decided we have to focus more on everything defense related. Indeed, exactly as you said, that has to do with making sure your infrastructure can not only support your Volvo car, but is also able to support the tank, to make sure the tank can, for example, cross the bridge. It has to do with developing the defense industrial base, because what is really keeping me awake at night is, yes, of course, the defense spending, but I think we can get there in The Hague. I must say the longer-term reason to stay awake at night is that we are not producing enough to make sure that we can defend ourselves, for example, against the Russians, and they're rapidly reconstituting themselves, including their defense industrial base, having their whole economy now on a war footing. And that means that the 1.5% is also related to this, developing the defense industrial base. And then third, indeed, is the whole of society approach. You here in Sweden, and I met him, you have a minister who is solely responsible for, I don't know exactly what his job title is, but not for the defense part, but to make sure that the whole of society is prepared. Sorry for the way I explained it. You know better, of course, his exact job title, but I met the guy and I was really impressed. But also countries like Norway, the Baltics, Finland, but many other parts, including my own country, we have not something like that. We need to develop much more in terms of getting the whole of society prepared. And that is much more than making sure we have water for 3 days. Yes, that's also part of it. But it has to do with where do you go to if a disaster, natural disaster or a military disaster strikes your country. Where do you go to? What is your role? Who will do what, etc. So that is much more than only making sure that you have food and water for 3 days.
I hear that Mark Rutte had a good meeting with Carl-Oskar Bolin. And yes. Honestly, when I appointed...
I still don't know his job title. What was the job title?
Minister for Civil Defense. No. So when I appointed him, we realized that the first minister with that title and responsibilities since the Second World War. So I think that says something about the tradition, but also the needs we have right now.
Okay, Reuters, if there was a question, then SVD. Okay, SVD.
Okay. Yeah, first a question for both of you, and that is, how can the international community work to bring this back to the negotiation table? The situation in the Middle East, and can you estimate the chances of that happening? And then I have a question for the Secretary General, and that is 5% is what the U.S. President Donald Trump has been talking about. If you decide on 5% in The Hague, will that satisfy Donald Trump and protect the transatlantic link? And what will happen if many countries doesn't reach the goal?
Well, on your first question, as I said, the situation is rapidly evolving. Of course, this all started last night. And I know that allies are really navigating this crisis and everybody is focused on de-escalation. But of course, all the next steps will follow from that. So it's difficult now to predict exactly what will happen over the next 24 and 48 hours. But I think there is a focused endeavor to make sure that de-escalation is the key to all the efforts. On your second question, when I got this role, and particularly when Donald Trump was elected as the 47th American president, many people asked me, is the US still committed to NATO? And I said yes, based on my talks with the Americans, with the talks the American president and his team had with the French president, with so many other leaders, etc. I said, but there is an expectation coming with the commitment. An expectation is that they are fed up and extremely irritated with the fact that the Americans, on average, spend 3.4, 3.5, 3.6% on defense, and that here on the European and Canadian side, we are somewhere at 1.9%. Because we are very rich countries. Of course, the US is rich, but we are also very rich. So I said that commitment comes with an expectation that we will somehow equalize with what the US is spending. Now, to your question, and trying to give an answer. This whole process is not about an audience of one. It is about keeping 1 billion people safe. And to keep 1 billion people safe, we have assessed together these capability targets, the gaps we have, what do we need to do in terms of long-range missiles, maneuverable land formations, command and control, air defense systems, ×5 from what we have now. So this is a huge, huge investments in people, in equipment, newest technology, AI, etc. To keep ourselves safe. And yes, coming to 3.5% will also more or less equalize with the US. And I totally understand the US position that after even Eisenhower, when he was president, complaining about the fact that the Europeans and Canada were not paying what the US was spending on defense, that they want this settled now. So they are totally committed because the US knows that for their security, a secure Atlantic, a secure Arctic and a secure Europe is key. Jonas Störe, the Norwegian Prime Minister, was in the White House and he showed the American president this map of the biggest port in Russia, which has these huge submarines which are able to fire nuclear missiles onto the US. And he said these submarines are not there to attack Norway, they are there to attack the United States. And it is Europe which prevents these submarines to ever get to a position where they could successfully do this. And this shows you that our collective defense, our collective security is totally interconnected. And therefore the US is totally committed to NATO. But this irritant is there. And we have to solve this because otherwise it might eat away at the commitment. And therefore I'm so happy that it seems in The Hague that we can agree. And again, not to only satisfy the audience of one, but we need this to keep 1 billion people safe.
But what would happen if countries doesn't...
No, but listen to the Swedish Prime Minister just a minute ago, saying Sweden, I was even understanding when he was speaking in Swedish. And beslut is a decision. Exactly.
Quite right.
And the beslut is clear. And these besluts are now being taken not only here in Sweden, but all over NATO territory. There is a big commitment, and of course we will follow what is happening. We'll make sure that where necessary we encourage allies along to do more if necessary. But I'm pretty much convinced that people understand this is directly connected to the threat of Russia. The German Chief of Defense stating the other day that between 3 and 5 years, I think he said about 4 years from now, Russia might be able to launch a successful attack at NATO territory. So let's not kid ourselves. This is a real risk. And 4 years is now. It's not in 4 years. Basically, if you say 4 years, yes, 4 years. But obviously you have to prepare for that. So the preparations have to start now. And not only Russia, also China building up its military, working together with Iran, with North Korea, supporting Russia's war effort in Ukraine. So this world is totally different from 5 to 10 years ago.
These besluts, that's a good one.
Thank you. And with that, time is unfortunately up, so we'll have to end this press conference.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.